Hey, what's going on? Ryan here with Intersection Records. I wanted to make a follow-up video to my Ozzy Osbourne tribute yesterday. Ozzy Osbourne, of course, passed away yesterday at the age of 76. And, I just kind of wanted to highlight how important he was and how he stayed relevant. The hardest thing in rock music, and you can look at any band as an example, the Rolling Stones and McCartney and U2 and these mega bands that are huge, Queens. Ozzy stayed relevant over the entire course of his career for a number of different reasons. One, his own talent. Two, his just unique persona, bigger than life, bigger than music in a way his persona was. And the way that there was so much mythology about his offstage antics as much as his onstage antics. He was born in Birmingham, England in 1948. And, his parents were factory workers. Ozzy quit school at 15 years old. He started working at a slaughterhouse. He ends up meeting Geezer Butler as a teenager. And then, of course, they found Black Sabbath and released their first album in 1970. And really the rest is history. Each of those first albums are incredibly influential. The album Black Sabbath itself released in February of 70, so almost working into the 60s with a February release. In fact, the album was recorded in October of 69. So really, this music is from 69 and released in early 70s, spanning 7 decades, right? The Wizard, NIB, the title track, Black Sabbath itself. You move on to his second record, Paranoid, which is really the quintessential Sabbath album in a lot of ways, just with a track listing like War Pigs, Paranoid, Planet Caravan, one of my favorites, Iron Man, Fairies Wear Boots. Again, moving into Masters of Reality with songs like, of course, Sweet Leaf and Children of the Grave and Into the Void. Of course, their classic Volume 4 record is going to have songs, like Changes and Supernaut. And you can go on with the rest of their discography, staying relevant, inventing a genre in a sense, or really perfecting a genre. And then we get to the end of the decade and he is escorted out of the band. He is fired essentially from Sabbath. He's now dating Sharon Arden, who is the record company's the daughter of Don Arden, who's running the recording company that Sabbath works for, and she picks him up by his bootstraps. He's depressed, and what do? They make the greatest decision in heavy metal history by bringing Randy Rhoads on the scene. Randy Rhoads is from the San Diego area, California. He's a classical music guy, but he's also in a band called Quiet Riot, who's working the Sunset Strip with Kevin DuBrow. They bring him on. He's relatively unknown. Of course, he's known from Quiet Riot. He's known from the Sunset Strip, but he's not known really far outside of that. And Ozzy takes him to heights internationally, and he becomes really a second guitar god underneath Edward Van Halen as the most important. That first album has Crazy Train on it. One of my favorite deeper tracks, Goodbye to Romance. Listen to Goodbye to Romance today and think about Randy and think about Ozzy. They're now reunited in rock and roll heaven. Suicide Solution, Mr. Crawley's on that album. Really, the next album's even better. The next record is an even better record called Diary of a Madman, featuring Over the Mountain, one of my favorite Ozzy songs. Flying High Again. If you can't crank that up in the stereo, Flying High Again. Believer is also on that. Little Dolls, Diary of a Madman, the song itself, You Can't Kill Rock and Roll. Unfortunately, in 1982, the unthinkable happens. Ozzy's rejuvenated himself. He has this band. He's touring with Tommy Aldridge on drums and Rudy Sarzo on bass and the great Randy Rhoads. And Randy Rhoads dies in Florida on a tour stop when a little prop plane that they went on a joyride hits the tour bus. Randy is killed instantly in an explosion. And this great momentum from these phenomenal albums. Now we have Black Sabbath with Dio putting great albums out. We have Ozzy with Randy Rhoads putting incredible albums out. Randy's dead. Where do you go from there? They bring in Brad Gillis to finish the tour off. They do a live album. Then they make a great decision and bring in Jakey Lee. And we have Bark at the Moon. We have the great title track, Bark at the Moon, the second release in 84, So Tired. They then go on to do another album with Jake, and one of my favorite kind of almost ballads, Shot in the Dark, is released in 1986, January of 86. And again, we've now are 4 albums deep. Ozzy has picked himself up from his bootstraps again and made it with another guitar player. And then, of course, Jake leaves, and we bring on the great Zakk Wylde, and we have the album No Rest for the Wicked with songs like Miracle Man and Crazy Babies, right? And then 1991's No More Tears, being propped up again by MTV. We have songs like No More Tears and Mama, I'm Coming Home, and we're continuing the chart success, with the title track, again, No More Tears, Hellraiser. Osmosis is next, right? Again, each one of these albums has hits on it, and that's a hard thing to do. We're now going from the 70s to the 80s to the 90s, and songs like Perry Mason and See You on the Other Side, I Just Want You. See You on the Other Side is another great song to be playing today and thinking about Ozzy. Now we're in 95. Again, from 70 to 95, we're still relevant. Down to Earth comes out in 01, yet another decade, in the song Dreamer, one of the great ballads by Ozzy. Get Me Through is another single. I think that was the first single off the album. Now we're in the new millennium, and Ozzy's still going strong. Black Rain comes out in 07. I remember driving to meet some family, and I heard I Don't Want to Stop on the radio. I'm like, Ozzy's doing it again? That's an awesome song with those swells in the guitar. I guess, again, by Zakk Wylde and Mike Boredom on drums. You get into the next millennium, and Scream comes out in 2010. Scream's flanked by the song Let Me Hear You Scream. That's 2010, but in 13, Black Sabbath reunites for the album 13, which is an awesome record with multiple awesome songs on that last album by Sabbath, 13, that came out in 2013. And then, finally, what songs were on that record? Anyway, and then in the 2020s, Ozzy then comes out with his, Ordinary Man record. Again, Under the Graveyard was a cool track that was off of that. Straight to Hell was another song. Patient Number 9 comes out in his last final studio album, 2022. And that song, Patient Number 9, was awesome. He's smart enough to get people like Slash on the record. He's smart enough to have Zakk Wylde come back and Andrew Watt producing and Andrew Watt playing guitars. Eric Clapton's on guitar in one of the songs. Taylor Hawkins, just to make this quick, we have Ozfest over the years, and that's bringing in new fans. It's also promoting his brand. It brings Sabbath back. Sabbath starts touring again with Ozzy in like 97. They do tours in 98, 99, 04, 05. Like I said, I saw them in 04. Ozfest brings a whole nother level. The show The Osbournes brings on a whole nother level of depth to his character and his brand. And then, of course, the final concert, the end, beginning of the end, or whatever they called it, back on July 5th, where every notable metal band that was influenced by Sabbath performs Ozzy and Sabbath songs, and Ozzy ultimately at the end of the night performs with Zakk Wylde again, and Mike Inez, and Tommy Klofus on drums, and then the great original lineup of Black Sabbath performs, and Ozzy gets a chance to say goodbye and dies 17 days later. Says goodbye to his family and his friends, and there's great pictures taken with Steven Tyler and James Hetfield and all these guys celebrating Ozzy Osbourne. Check out my channel. We only talk about great music every day here on Intersection Records. Peace out. Rest in peace, Ozzy.